Adrian, it's lovely to have you back.
And you, Graham.
And obviously under difficult circumstances, but it's great to have your expertise. So I'm going to dive right in. I know you're a workaholic.
Mm-hmm.
You're a self-confessed workaholic.
Mm.
So how is it when you're a workaholic, I am too, and suddenly your work is disrupted and you're now working from home? I mean, I've always worked from home, but my business is disrupted. What would you say, are the major benefits of working from home? And I suppose also the other side. Tell me about that.
The distractions. I think the benefits are that you have a lot more choice. When you get up, I can control my life very much more easily. I have autonomy. I've been up this morning since 4:30, and I've written for now 5 hours. So I don't have, it's control over where I work and how I work. There's also the issue of no commuting. I don't have to commute. I don't have to wear smart clothes. I have a lot of choice. I am, of course, fortunate. Not everybody can work from home in the same way. If you're a builder or somebody working in a restaurant, you can't do that. But it suits me quite well. At least those are the advantages. I have my strange, it's called chronobiology. I'm a lark, not an owl. So I can work when it suits me best. There are disadvantages, of course. The question is, I work with colleagues. People work for me, and of course I'm not concerned about it, but others are, that they're not always working as hard. There's the issue of a breakdown in technology. We've had that already, which is awful, terrifying. There are issues about the nature of contact. You see, look at you and I. We're what we call talking heads at the moment. We're like newsreaders. Now, you can't see that I'm actually wearing shorts, or you can't see that my feet are moving. So, can we negotiate by this medium? Well, do we see enough of each other? So there are disadvantages as well. It seems to be quite natural, but there are disadvantages, I think. But overall, if you are fortunate enough to be a sort of desk worker or a knowledge worker, then for some people like me, it suits me rather well.
Okay, well, so what about people? I mean, I've got people in my team who have been furloughed, for example, and under the system, under furlough, you're not allowed to work. And that's quite difficult from a mental health point of view, because they want to be busy.
Yes.
But for me to be able to support them, they cannot work so that we can benefit from it.
Yes.
So what happens there?
Well, it depends on your lifestyle, it depends on your hobbies. I mean, one of the things I think is that people need to develop a structure to their day. I have a structure, I have a bicycle ride at lunchtime, a walk in the afternoon. It'll be a time when it's like being retired, and retired people go through a bit of a shock. Had a colleague who took his dog for a walk, and I know you're a dog owner and a dog lover, and the problem, of course, is he walked the dog to death because he had nothing else to do but take the dog for a walk. But I think if you can, to find other activities to fill your day, other activities you've perhaps given up, some sort of hobbies that you can do at home. The best way is to get a structure to your day, also to contact people via Zoom, via telephone, because social contact is important.
Listen, I've got to come back to this point about the dog, because being a dog lover, please tell me the dog's okay.
The dog is okay.
Okay.
It's overwalked.
Okay, that's fine. As long as the dog gets some rest. That's really important, that the dog is most important. Okay, so what about if you are a manager and you have a team? What are the drawbacks there?
Well, I'm in this position, you're in the position. It's, number one, some people are concerned that their team aren't working. That it's a nice day today. You could be sitting outside and reading a book or doing something else. For many of us, that's not an issue. What I think you do is you set targets. So you say, well, by the end of this week, these are the sort of things I'd like you to do. When you do it exactly is not that important. And to check in every 2 or 3 days on progress on these sort of issues. I think that's the best you can do. It's not about monitoring people whether they're sitting at their desk, whether they're sitting at their computer. It's, are they doing something in their own time? Set them targets, ask them whether those targets are reasonable, and ask them to give you feedback on how they're doing. That works reasonably well, I think.
Okay, and would you say that when you've got this change thrust upon you, that you might not be quite as productive as you would have been in the past?
Well, yes and no. It depends on what you're doing. you know, I'm doing academic work, I'm writing a book at the moment, I'm actually more productive because I don't have interruptions. It depends on the nature of the work you do. It depends partly on your personality. I mean, there's some interesting issues. For instance, does it make you more creative? Well, people say, you need to have people around you or whatever. It's, you know, we know, for instance, paradoxically, that brainstorming doesn't work. Brainstorming doesn't work. It's much better to work on your own. Now, if you want to be creative, you don't have some of the problems of brainstorming, that people manically wandering around and distracting you. We know in brainstorming groups, some people don't take part. I think if you look at the literature on great creative people, whether they be in the arts or the sciences, paradoxically, they do it often alone. They have their best ideas in the shower or going for a walk. So sometimes with some types of work, like creativity, like writing, like thinking, I think you're advantaged by working at home. Other jobs, that's clearly not the case.
I think that's fine for you and me where we don't have children interrupting us. I'm sure that the whole children and schooling from home and having them, that must be very difficult. I'm finding it hard. My partner normally is out from the crack of dawn and doesn't come back until late at night. He's at home every day, and we both, although we have a big house, the noise travels, and I find he distracts me. And I mean, I've sent him out with the dog so that we can have this conversation. I suspect he'll come back before we've finished. But it's, I find that difficult as well. And of course, the relationship, you've got to handle it carefully, haven't you? This negotiation of when I need you to be quiet.
We know, I've done some work on people who become unemployed or retired. And the wives say you've got twice as much husband and half as much pay and twice as much distraction. And I think you've got to get into a routine, into a ritual which suits the both of you. Some people want interaction every 2 hours. So my wife and I, we have morning tea, we have lunch, afternoon tea and dinner. And in the rest of the time, we're fortunate in being in a big house and distance from each other. But it's getting into a ritual and coming up with some agreements where there's a time of the day and an activity where you need personally absolute quiet, no distractions, the telephone or for whatever.
So talk to me as well. You said it's very important for us to stay socially connected. When it comes to work, is it better to use email? We're using Zoom. Is it better to use Zoom? Is it better to use the telephone? Should we do a mixture? Should we do more of one?
Actually, we've got three media. We've got email, which is verbal. So you see what I wrote to you. So it's verbal only. On the telephone, you've got verbal and vocal. So you've got the sound of my voice. You can hear whether I've got a cold. You can hear whether I'm emotional. Now we have verbal, vocal, and visual. We have television, as it were. So you can see me and I can see you, or some of you and some of me. The question is, which do you remember best? So if I was trying to communicate a difficult message or a sensitive message, some people would say, oh, let's Zoom it because we can see each other and it's more personal. But of course, I might notice the flowers in the background of your Zoom. I might be concentrating on your new spectacles or whatever. We know, paradoxically, that people remember less from this sort of interaction they do from verbal interaction. So if I was communicating to you a sensitive message, a difficult message, I would start off by email because people process it differently. They process it at their own speed, in their own way, and it's also there to keep. Well, of course, you can record a Zoom, but I think I would, if the more important the message, the more important for its subtlety and the more important for its memorability, the more important it's verbal, not vocal or visual. So I would support a verbal message by a visual message. Zoom after you send an email is my answer.
Oh, that's interesting, because I would have been tempted to do it the other way around.
Well, you could. I express my sympathy or my gratefulness or whatever, and then send you an email. Fine. But the two need to complement each other, and they don't always do so. I think, we get put off by the visuals. You are seeing my room, and your mind might wander and thinking, what the hell's on his back shelf, that sort of thing. Whereas with email, one concentrates the more. So they need to complement one another, but people often assume that subtle or important or emotional messages are best communicated this way. I'm not so certain. I think, if you have to have a very difficult message for somebody, you have to give them a difficult appraisal. Often it's best done. You can choose your words very carefully. You can be very thoughtful with the way in which you phrase something, which you might not do as easily or as comfortably face to face like this.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. So going back to the sort of the social distancing, the fact that, some of us might find ourselves alone. So I spoke to a client recently, and they found that she's found herself separated from her partner. One's ended up on one continent, she's on the other. She doesn't have family. Her job's stopped. And she's struggling. She's feeling lonely, feeling isolated. What advice would you give somebody who's feeling like that?
Well, I would start. I had someone connect old friends, what's it called? Something revived, Friends Revived or something. I don't do it myself.
There used to be Friends Who United, but I thought that got replaced by Facebook, didn't it?
No, I think they're still both alive. But what I've been doing is I've been filtering my inbox and my outbox and seeing there's all sorts of people I communicated with in 2016. I thought, God, what's happened to them? And I've renewed all sorts of correspondences. And it's not quite the same as chatting to somebody. But if you're an email person, you've got logged out, then that activity alone is very interesting. I have a friend who's been very ill, and he's done his network of friends. You do these concentric circles, the closest friends, and as they go out, you see them. And he started contacting the friends he doesn't see so often. It's not the same, but it's purposeful. And occasionally you get these amazing letters from nowhere. There's one other thing, it's rather interesting. It comes from the work on positive psychology. And it's called being grateful, sending letters of gratitude. There's a radio program on this where you phone in to thank somebody who helped you in 2004, and newspapers have this. And, I think this gives us an interesting opportunity to say, I never really thanked this person well enough, and to send them an email. That is, if you feel good, the other people feel good, and you maintain a sort of contact. It's not a full substitution for being in regular face-to-face contact, but it's not a bad start.
I like that. I like this talk of gratitude. So tell me something. Why is it, and I'm seeing this happening, and I'm doing it too. I mean, I've worked from home all the time anyway, but why am I eating more? And why am I drinking more? What is it about that? And I hear lots of people are doing that. Well, you don't look like you have been.
Well, I've had an incident where I can't eat and drink quite as much as I could. I mean, I think it's boredom in a way. And one says, oh, we'll just have a cup of tea. Well, next to the cup of tea, there's a banana and a biscuit, and you have these sort of things. Again, it's a matter of getting into a routine and getting into a ritual of when you eat and what you eat, and having some foods which are prohibited. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon. I'll be tempted at 5 o'clock, being a colonial, to sit on the veranda and have a glass of wine. I probably will, but only one. I'm more strict about that sort of thing. But this is, again, it's boredom. Sometimes it's frustration. The Freudians say, if we are oral, it's the comfort food idea, that it's comforting to eat and to drink. There are better ways of finding comfort. Again, get into a ritual, set things out as clearly as you can, and don't not enjoy the odd, bottle of champagne or whatever, but try not to do it so regularly.
Okay. And what about, obviously we've got these daily briefings happening in the media telling us what's going on. Is that a good thing to listen to, or should we shut ourselves off and not, because it can be quite depressing?
Yes, I do think that depends partly on your personality. I mean, the question is what has changed? Not very much has changed. We know what the rules are. We all know what the rules are about distancing and washing your hands and so forth. The big issue is, of course, when this is going to change. I heard on the news not a few minutes ago that we're probably going to have another 2 weeks of social isolating. I think not watching it the whole time is probably better for you. I don't think it's escapist. I don't think it's denialist. I think you'll find out very easily what the crucial changes are. So my advice, or my pattern, is to watch and read periodically rather than on a daily basis. I think it's rather gloomy. I agree with you.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And so explain to me then the psychology. We all know we have to social distance. We all know we have to stay at home. So why do people not do it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of reasons, of course. One is that they are desperately frustrated. They don't cope with the isolation at all. They're not used to this, and they really do feel the need for contact. What I noticed yesterday in a long queue for a supermarket was, of course, actually it provoked quite a lot more contact. You talk to people. There might be some distance from you, but you talk more rather than less about the situation and what people think of the future. There are those, and it's been somewhat surprising to me how many have not obeyed the rules. For our evening walk, my wife and I go round about, and we saw police on horses breaking people up in little parties. They're nearly always young people. Maybe they believe that they are invulnerable, they're less likely to get any problems, and that, of course, is true. And they're rule breakers. It's very boring and very frustrating for some. And they think, oh, damn it, I'm a bit of a risk taker. I'm unlikely to get it. I'm not on the risk-taking list, so let's go for it. And that'll always be the case. There are very few societies, Japan is the exception, where people really, really follow the rules very carefully in large numbers. They're very collectivist societies. We're more individualistic, and you'll find people not quite obeying the rules in such a way. I'm surprised not by, psychologists are interested not by why people disobey rules, but why people obey rules. We're interested in obedience and conformity. And for me, it's been shockingly surprising how good people have been overall, how often they will fulfill these roles. All sorts of people, ages and stages and whatever, they are being good, at least in public. And that, I think that's more surprising than the fact that some people break the rules.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So we have to talk about money. Because I know that that's one of the areas you talk about, one of your specialties, well, of the many. And for some people, money is going to be an issue now because they haven't got savings. So for me, I'm a director of a limited company, so I rely on my dividends really as my payment. So I'm not covered by any schemes currently at the time of recording. We never know, it might change. Fortunately, I do have some savings. But why do some people save and others don't? And do you think people will change after this experience?
To the second answer first, no, they won't. And I think it comes from a very deep background. I mean, for instance, have you ever had a relationship? I think you're a bit of a spender, Maria. Is that right?
I am a spender.
I'm a saver. Have you ever had a relationship with anybody in the past who's been the opposite of you?
Yes.
It's very traumatic, isn't it?
It didn't work.
It doesn't work. Of all the characteristics, you say to people, what do you want in your partner? What are the things that are most important? They say, oh, they want me to be kind and intelligent. Well, if you're a spender and you have a relationship with a saver, whatever that relationship, it's profoundly shocking how, that you think he's mean and he thinks you're wasteful and fickle and so on and so forth. Psychologists have been very interested in the spender-saver. People do divide quite dramatically on this. And the idea is partly of your attitudes towards money, of course, and not your attitudes, but your feelings about it. So there's issues around security. And why do you save the money? Many people save money irrationally, not rationally. They put money in the bank when they don't have to. They skimp and save when they don't have to. I'm one of those. And I say the advantage I have over many of my colleagues is I had poor parents. My mother was a missionary in Africa. We had no money. And I learned, therefore, how important money was. My parents told me that nothing should be bought in cash. Everything should be bought in, nothing should be bought on tick. The only thing you couldn't afford to save up and buy was a house, but everything you had to save up by. So I think it's to do with early childhood. I think it's to do with feelings of security. If you feel that money is associated with power, which I think, an example, Mr. Trump would be one of those people, or money is associated with freedom, or money is associated with love, then you spend the money. You spend the money to show your power. You give gifts to people as a sign of your love, as opposed to holding it back. But I think, people will say quite quickly, are you a spender, are you a saver? It's not, it's yes, I'm one or the other. And it'll affect the whole of your life, your attitudes to time, to cleanliness, to organization. The Freudians have been very interested in all this. So advice number one is, when you're having a relationship or plan to have a relationship with somebody, work out very early if they're a spender or a saver, because it could be a cause of an enormous problem later.
So my ex's favourite saying was, every pound's a prisoner.
And you remember that?
Oh yes, he was very careful, but he did very well, out of it. And I mean, I do have a few savings, but that's not down to me. That's down to my accountant. So.
Exactly, and you're wise enough to have an accountant.
And my financial advisor. Yeah, otherwise I would, as you say, I would have spent it all. So yes, you're absolutely right. My lovely fiance is also a spender.
There you are.
So there you go. There you go. So I'm interested to hear that you're saying that people won't change. Do you think, so, okay, when we do go back to the new normal, when we go back to, do you think people won't have changed? We're going to go back to our old habits then?
Yes, I'm afraid I do. I mean, you do see periodically television programs and radio programs about trying to help people budget more clearly. You see families, they're quite interesting programs on how irrational they are with their spending, how much they waste and throw away. And it's very difficult to change. You can change. I mean, we know changing personal habits is very, very difficult. And it's, in a sense, a personal habit. I think when people go back to whatever the new normal is, that the way in which they spend or use the money will be the same. If they have less money, it won't stop them being intuitively a saver or a spender. So I'm a bit of a pessimist from this point of view.
And talk to me about loss aversion, because I know this is something that you talk about. What does that mean?
Yeah, the Nobel Prize for Economics, won by Daniel Kahneman, was often about loss aversion. And the question is, the benefits, the joy and gains is about half as much as the pain and loss. Let me give you an example that I always like. It was an Israeli bank, and they were trying to get people to use their credit cards more, because you make more money in a bank if people use and overspend on their credit card. So how would you encourage people to use their credit card more? Well, number one, you can say you get air miles, you get some sort of benefit of using your credit card. That's strategy number one. Strategy number two would be, you can have a gold card or a something card, and people will be very impressed by you if you use it a lot and be the card. They tried both strategies, they didn't work. They tried another strategy saying, if you don't use your card every 3 months, we'll take it away. That worked. And so what we know is that the fear of loss is much more powerful than the joy of gain. Now, Mr. Cameron tried hard to do this. If you remember the Brexit campaign and all of that, which seems a long time ago now, given all the passions, he tried fear of loss. It was all about the whole campaign of the Brexiteers, of the Remainers, was the cost, how terrible it's going to be. They never told anybody about the benefits. So they took the principle of loss aversion, the aversion of losing anything, too far. I think what you do is it's carrot and stick. And I say to people, in your organization, is it a carrot organization? Is it a stick organization? Are you motivated by promise of reward or fear of punishment? And they all say both, and that's true. But I think in advertising and in ways in which trying to persuade people, what we know is that loss aversion, the idea of taking something away, has more power rather than promising people something as a reward. So the power of loss aversion is very, very important. And advertising and marketing people are becoming much more aware of it.
So Adrian, I could talk to you all day long, but I'm going to end with a really big question for you, because we're talking about loss. And people are going to come out of this having lost money, having lost jobs, having lost friends and family. How do we stay sane? How do we stay optimistic?
There is a big literature on the psychology of loss, on death and dying, loss of job, migration. And what we tend to know is that people go through a systematic pattern. So the first thing is shock and surprise. And then we go through, it's well known, it comes from the work of a woman called Kubler-Ross on the stages of dying. And what you find is that people, first of all, you get shock and surprise, then you get anxiety and depression. You've lost something important, your life will never be the same. And that's something you have to accept and work through. Then there is the gradual acceptance of this and a readjustment, and back to a normal. So it's a sort of U-curve. Some people get stuck. They get stuck in the depression phase and the anxiety phase, and they need help for this. It's the stage which can be the deepest and the darkest. But in everything we've experienced, when we've experienced loss, we've all had experiences of loss of one sort or another, loss of friends, loss of relationships, whatever. We know it's not the end of the world. And to help people knowing that it's perfectly normal, to normalize this, that you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel depressed, the world's going to look very dark. But there is, and of course you see this in all the messages, there is a horizon, there's a brighter side. And you need to work on this, you need to talk it through with other people. So you expect the U-curve to occur. And it's not unusual to get stuck. You need help when you get stuck in this phase. It's dangerous not to confront it. There's another one, there's one other point that is interesting, particularly with death and dying, and that's the emotion of anger. People don't expect anger. They expect depression and anxiety. But you get angry. You get angry with the person who has died, or you get angry with the government. You get angry with people who you believe have caused this to you. It's very difficult to deal with people who are angry. I'm not saying you have to suppress your anger, but when you're helping people, you're going to get surprised at times by those who appear to be irrationally angry about the person who's died. They're angry with God. They're angry with all sorts of people. It's an emotion which comes out. It's an emotion which is there. It's an emotion which we need to recognize and to work through.
So really, we need to work through this. We need to find routine. We need to talk and stay connected. I think those are the main points I've taken out. Have I taken out the right points there?
I think you have. And to just cut down to one bottle of champagne a day, Maria.
Cheeky. Adrian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maria.